Hi everyone, my name is Suzanne and I'm a Chinese metaphysics master in Hong Kong. Today we're going to go back to our Bazi chart and we are looking at the work styles of different Bazi structures. Now, this is important because, most of us have a boss and it's important to understand how he operates, what he likes, what he doesn't like, and how we need to adapt our own behavior at work to make sure that our boss likes us, because then the chances of getting a promotion are higher. But then also, obviously, how to work with your colleagues, with your coworkers. Sometimes our work styles are completely opposite, and that can lead to a lot of friction at work. But if you understand how someone actually works, um, you often realize that it's not that they're lazy or that they don't take instructions. They just work differently. And if you learn to understand that, suddenly you end up becoming a really, really good team, even with someone who has a totally different work style. So this is what we're going to look at today. Now, you will have to plot your Bazi chart, and you can go to this link here. And just put in your date and time of birth. If you don't know the time, it's a little bit less accurate, but so we're always encouraging you to put so at least an approximate time in there. Obviously, if you're checking on what sort of work style your boss has, it's unlikely that you know his or her time of birth. Then don't worry, just put the date of birth in there, and it will still give you a pretty good idea of how they work. So I'll also put the link in the description of the video. And then once you've plotted this chart, this sort of diagram is right at the bottom of the chart. So you will get a 2-page chart, and this will be at the bottom left of the chart that you've plotted. It says the 5 structures. So what we are interested in here, let me just take out my color pen. So we are looking at the beige color diagram. So this one here, yeah, forget about the purple one. We're not really interested in that. So forget about the purple one. And then you just check which structure is the strongest. So here we've got an output structure, wealth structure, influence, resource, and companion. Now, these 5 are the same for everyone, but obviously they may appear in a different distribution here. But you check which one is strongest. And here, very clearly, the output structure is the strongest. Yeah. So check which one is the strongest. Now, sometimes you have 2 structures that are equally as strong. So maybe you have a wealth and a resource structure both at 80%, then both of them apply. Yeah, so just look at the strongest, forget completely about the rest. Now, once you've identified the structure, then that will give you a lot of information about how this person actually works. So let's start with the output structure, because we're here and this is the strongest anyway. So output structure individuals, they tend to be the ones coming up with the plans and with the ideas. They dream up grand ideas, and they have a lot of backstories to their ideas, and they're extremely skilled and creative. They are able to conjure up a lot of ideas and just in one go. So if you need sort of creative input, these are the people to go to. But on the negative end, they might be too imbalanced to actually implement the ideas, to see them through, and then to just break them down into small action steps. So they can't really take those grand ideas and break them down into the smaller details. And also, they're not very good at taking criticism. Yeah, so you have to be very careful when you criticize them, or when you don't like an idea of theirs, very careful with how you actually break it to them. But so on the outside, it looks like they like to look good, but they hardly get anything done, right? So this is what it looks like on the outside, and that can be infuriating if you are a doer. Now, from a leadership style perspective, they're very good at inspiring a team, and they always seek out new things. So they're the first people who want to introduce a new structure or a new plan or a new idea or whatever. Can be very upsetting for people who like to just like things the way they are. They like to stay the status quo, because if your boss is an output structure, they will constantly try to implement new systems. But they do instill a lot of hope, and they're very good at motivating people. But they're also very temperamental. Yeah, creative people, they're a little bit temperamental, and that may cause uncertainty among staff, personnel, and team members. Now, how do you deal with people like this? Yeah, so ideally, you got to be well prepared for a debate. If you don't like an idea, don't just say, I don't like the idea. You need to back it up with something, right? Or come up with a better idea, ideally. Um, they will only bow down to someone who knows more than they do. Yeah, that they will appreciate that. So therefore, if you just say, I don't like the idea, that's just not going to work. You have to back it up and come up with something better. And it's better for output people to have one-to-one meetings rather than group sessions or meetings or team meetings. Yeah, it's much, much better to deal with them in like sort of like in a casual sort of one-to-one style. So this is how you deal with output people. Now, resource people or resource structures, on the other hand. So resource structure individuals, they excel in questioning the hows and the whys of every project and procedure. Yeah, they want to know exactly why we're doing this, how are we going to do this, how long is it going to take, what kind of money is involved. So they want to know every single detail. Yeah, very opposite of the output structure. They are very good with they're very good with analyzing data, and they're usually very, very intelligent. Yeah, not to say that the other structures are not intelligent, but they're very data and detail driven. So they enjoy learning, and they enjoy improving themselves. So if they're forced to do something, bring it to them in terms of, okay, this is going to make your life better, this is going to make your work easier, and this is what you're going to learn. They also tend to be very, very analytical, structured, and very, very orderly. So if you need someone who brings order to chaos, a resource structure is the best person. They may not be very creative, but they will bring order to chaos. Yeah, you can rely on that. You can count on them to really look at everything from every angle, and then they will just bring structure into something that is very, very chaotic. So, especially if, let's say, a project is going completely off the rails, maybe bring it to a resource person to get it back on track. That would be very beneficial. Now, in terms of leadership, yeah, so if your boss is a resource structure, they tend to give very little direction to their employees, because they just sort of expect that you learn things yourself, that you're like them. They delegate responsibilities, but then they sort of expect you to sort of like learn on the go, because that's what they would do. So they just sort of expect that from you, and you kind of need to adapt a little bit to that. Now, how do you deal with resource people? So you always need to have an action plan when you talk to them, because otherwise you're just going to get drowned out in sort of like discussions about data and data points and so much information. Yeah, it's okay to have data, and it's okay to have a lot of information, but you need to use this information, otherwise it's useless. So having the information and then being prepared with a concrete action plan that gives you control over the conversation or the discussion or the meeting with a resource person, because they're the thinkers, they're not necessarily the doers. So if you show them that you can do or that you can execute ideas or execute their plans based on the data they provided, they will let you run with it. You also need to force or you need to make them commit to be responsible and take decisions through legal documents, right? So, for example, always have everything in writing with a resource person. As long as it's in writing, they will stick to it. So not necessarily just in legal documents, but lay everything out in an email, let them sign off on it, or just let them reply, say, okay, I agree, or whatever. And then that is sort of like binding for both of you. Also, don't expect them to be too organized themselves. So even though they're good at bringing sort of like order to chaos, it's because they're thinking things through. But then once that is done, they tend to be all over the place because they're thinkers, they're not doers. And so you may have to, if your boss is a resource structure, you may have to organize their schedule, right? Keep them on track. And always understand that their decision-making process is very slow because they look at everything from 10 different angles. And so if you need a decision tomorrow, having a resource person as a decision maker can be really frustrating. So you need to be prepared for a longer decision-making process. Or do their homework for them. Yeah, if you want them to make quicker decision, then you do all the work. You just present them with sort of like the end result and then just be like yes or no. Yeah, but that means that you will have to do all the research, you will have to collate all the data and present it to them. Then it's faster, but otherwise you have to be prepared for a rather lengthy decision-making process. Now then we have the wealth structure. So the wealth structure people, they're very ambitious. They're sort of like go-getters and they have very high standards. And they expect other people to measure up to those standards. And that's very tricky, right? That this sort of they have very high expectations for themselves. And it's not necessarily fair to expect the same of other people. But they will do that. And so that can lead to conflict at work. They like managing people and situations and be in control of it. So they tend to be micromanagers. Yeah, they like to know exactly what's going on in every department and everything. And it does suit this sort of style suits their ability to create productive structures and systems. They like to create progress reports, and they like to create effective work processes, and they're very good in quality control as well. Yeah. So they look at quality, they look at the output, like everything needs to be just so. Now, if your boss is a wealth structure, he will likely manage in a very sort of like autocratic style, right? They command and control. They're not really listening to other people. They like to control other people, and they just tell people what to do without really listening for all that much input. Not because they're bad people, but they just want to get things done, and very often they think they can do it better than everyone else. So they're authority motivated. So if a particular project promises them a higher position or a higher reputation or whatever, they will be motivated by that. And they're also motivated by control. So that's why usually well-structured people, they climb the career ladder quite quickly, because they just want to get to the top. Because once you're at the top, you have control over everything. Then then everybody has to do things the way you want them to be done, right? So how do you deal with people like this? Because that can be quite difficult. They tend to be a little bit inflexible. When you deal with a wealth structure at work, whether that's a colleague or a boss, you have to remember not to take everything personally. If they criticize you for not sticking to the plan or for not doing things exactly the way they wanted, it's not because they think you're a bad person or because you're stupid. It's just their work style. They just like things just so. So really, at the moment you take it personal, you will never be able to see eye to eye with a wealth structure again. So just put that aside. It's really just a work style. They may actually like you on a personal level. They may just not like the way you work. Um, and don't ever fight them head on. Yeah, because then they become very, very aggressive. So if you want to fight their need to control, you got to be a little bit more diplomatic. And um, if one of your staff members is a wealth structure, then just give them a project or give them a challenge and let them run with it. Yeah. And put them in control. Yeah. Put them in control, not just of the project, but then also of the outcome. Make them responsible. And that will actually give you the best results. All right. So that's the wealth structure. Now, if you are, or if your boss, or if you're working with an influence structure, um, they can be they are usually quite okay, nice at the workplace, but and they're very good at following through with they're very good at following through with commands and orders and structures. They're good in a structured environment. Yeah. Like as long as there's like rules and regulations, they will follow through. Give them a proper framework to work within, and they will deliver the results and be very happy. Yeah, now there's a slight difference between the seven killings and the direct officer, but generally speaking, influence people, they're actually quite nice to work with. You just give them the rules and they will stick within the rules. Yeah. Now, they do have a very bureaucratic or leadership style. Yeah. So if your boss is an influence structure, you really need to go by the book. You cannot just go out of line and do things your way. Like you will really, really get into trouble with your boss if you do that. If they set out the framework, you need to stick within that framework. Follow the procedures, follow the policies. Now, if you don't like the procedures and the policies, and you maybe have an idea how to do this better, then you can present that to them, but back it up with data, back it up with clear examples, and then maybe that will change. But as long as you don't have a better idea, and as long as you can't back it up, then just stick with the framework. The good thing for employees with who have a influence structure boss is that you always know where you stand. Yeah, they're very open with you. Like if you stick to the structure, if you stick to the rules and regulations, they will like you, they will promote you. If you dance out of line, you've lost their trust. So you always know where you stand. Just do what they say and you're going to be fine. Now, if you're dealing with the influence structure, again, never force their hand because that will just make them extremely rigid and defensive. Play by the rules, play by the rules with them. And, if you feel like there's an opening or they're amendable to maybe changing the rules a little bit, then propose something, but don't force it. And what they really don't like is last minute changes to plans. Yeah. So whether that's a colleague or whether that's your boss, try to avoid last minute changes and cancellations or alterations to plans. Yeah. That is really, really going to set them off. Right. That's the influence structure or the influence work style. And then lastly, we've got the companion work style. So the companions, they're usually quite friendly and they're really sort of like they're the consummate networkers. Yeah, they thrive on creating connections with others. So they know everybody at the company, at the organizations. They're the ones that are the most friendly and outgoing at the workplace. They're the ones who organize the socials, for example. Yeah, they will not hesitate to get involved in things um, that they can excel in, and they strive to bring people together. So that is sort of like uh, their aim at work, right? It's not just work, but they also try to build friendships and connections at work. So if your boss is a companion structure, the leadership style will be quite democratic. So they share the responsibility. It's more like you feel like part of a team rather than there's a team leader or a boss and then everything else is done by the underlings. So delegation and continuous support is given to the employees. So they're very encouraging and they're also very empowering. So they really want the employees to sort of like step up and also take on sort of like leadership roles. Um, they consider employees whenever they make a decision. So it's not just that they consider the company overall, but when they take a decision, they also think about how does this affect the employees, how does this affect the staff, and what are the negatives and the positives of any decision. And they tend to keep their employees or the staff informed of what's going on. Yeah. For them, the key is or the important thing is that to build a good connection with the people at work. So whether that's whether the people at work are their co-workers or whether subordinates or superiors, they want to have good connections with everybody. And so they build this through communication and to networking and socializing. Now, how you deal with these people, because they can be a little bit overly extrovert. Yeah, like if you focus too much on just making friendships at work, you may not necessarily focus all that much on work itself. So you gotta enforce responsibility and set limits and demand accountability for what they've actually done work-wise. Yeah. I mean, if you tell them, look, organize a social for the next week, they will go all in. Yeah, they will be 100% on that, but then they will neglect the work. So you kind of have to rein them in just a little bit if these are your subordinates, for example. Also, they tend to buckle to peer pressure. So in order to avoid that, especially if you are talking to your boss, maybe get your boss in a meeting one-to-one. That is much better because then basically the only peer pressure there is you. Um, and always take what they say with a pinch of salt because they do tend to change their minds depending on how they think people perceive them, right? So it's not that they're liars or anything like this, but they just change their mind fairly quickly. And don't get into an argument with a companion person because the arguments can become quite emotional because they take everything personal. But everything for them is about social network and companionship and connections. So when you get into an argument, they do take this very personal, and then it becomes an emotional argument. So if this is one of your subordinates, you need to let them know that sort of like these sort of mood swings, for example, are unacceptable at work. So you got to put some dampers on that, right? So this is the companion structure. So these are the 5 different work styles that hopefully make it a little bit easier for you to deal with your coworkers or your boss, especially if you work in large teams. So at least you know how to deal with people in general. So hopefully this helped. If you have any questions, comments, of course, put them in the comment section below. I always love to hear from you. And if you like to learn Bazi in a more structured way, you can also take a look at my new e-learning platform, Life Mastery Studies. The link is in the description to the video as well. All right. So please give this video a like, share it with anybody who may be interested, and please subscribe to my channel. And I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much.